It's very hard not to be a cynic when you're up at 2:40 in the morning and completely unable to get to sleep. I'm recording this on a tiny little camera that was designed to take photographs rather than video, but it does have a video capability, and I wanted to test this out. And so I'm hoping my voice isn't tinny or hollow, but the only way I can really see is that if I do this, and as a way to test this, I'm going to be doing an impromptu book review right now of a book I just finished about an hour ago. So, the book in question is Infinite Jest. It's a very long book. It's hailed in literary departments as being absolutely work of genius. It is actually 1,079 pages long, and that's counting endnotes, of which there are 388 of. So it's a very long read. It takes a long time to read. I wouldn't say that it's a hard read, though. The sentences do take a bit of time to work through. And that's really where this book shines, is at the sentence level. Any of the macro levels, the tiny levels, are where this book is best at. Every sentence is amazing, every paragraph is great, every chapter is really, really good. And the incidents that it talks about are really, really interesting. Like and there's no spoilers in this review, so don't have any fear, I won't ruin the plot. And there is a plot which I'll discuss my problems with in a minute. But each of the incidents, like there's this thief, a burglar who burglars homes, and he has this really clever revenge against a DA who was trying to bust him a while back. There's the guy who traps cockroaches in glasses to watch them suffocate, which is this horrific, horrific thing, but because of the power of the sentences, you just have to keep reading. There's a schizophrenic who is terrified that people are going to capture him and inject him with poisonous substances in his skull, and then like put him into machines which are just going to mess with him. And then of course this guy is sent to a mental institution, and to study his malfunctioning brain they put radioactive dye in him for a scan, and then they put him in an MIR, a scanning machine, which is of course the accumulation of all his fears. So maybe he wasn't as paranoid, or at least falsely paranoid, as everybody would believe. And it's that section that the book really shines. Where the book fails is on the bigger levels, because if a novel is anything, it is a structurally sound, a structurally perfect piece of literature. I would argue that it is possible to write a 2,000-page story and not have it be a novel, because a novel has perfection of structural form in it above all else. That's why I think Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a novel. And I know if you look up on Wikipedia, it'll give you a novel is this many words, and a novella is this many words, and a novelette is this many words, and a short story is... The reason novels are long is to get that sort of structural perfection. They need to be long, but Robert Louis Stevenson achieves a structural perfection in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that is unmatched in a lot of longer works. And I would argue that that's more of a novel than, say, the Twilight books. So, what is wrong with Infinite Jest? I think it does have the novel format. I think it is a novel, by the way. I just think that there's so much crammed into it that we lose sight of what the plot is. And the plot is this autistic tennis savant, Hal Incandenza. His father has created a masterpiece on videotape called Infinite Jest, which this handicapped association of assassins wants, and they go and try to get it. The problem is that the book is so big, and the very incidents and things it covers, such as the drug rehab sections, the bits that it covers on like criminals and things like that, are just, they overwhelm the plot. And this is a book about drugs primarily, drugs in youth tennis academies, drug rehab, things like that, and that's the sort of focal pin that all ties it together. But I don't feel that it concentrates on the plot enough, because there's just too much going around, and I would much rather spend time with Hal at the tennis academy, seeing what he's going through, than all the interesting results, or all the interesting incidents that happen throughout the book. Because when you get to page 200, say, you're like, wow, this is a really good novel. And then you realize that you've got 8,000 or 800 more pages to go, and nothing's really been accomplished in 200 pages. And so all this stuff, all these incidents, I don't feel ever enforce the plot. I don't think they help the plot get along, which is a big problem for a novel. I just don't think the novel works at that level. And this book, and David Foster Wallace is a darling of the postmodernists, and I think this book has quite a bit of what's wrong with postmodernism. For example, the footnotes at the end, or the endnotes rather, they do nothing but interrupt the story. You literally cannot read through this all and stop every time there's a footnote, because the footnotes are in the back of the book. The length is also a problem, but in general I'm not opposed to long reads. For instance, I have this book of short story collections by Harlan Ellison, which is really good, and I read it in about a third of the time it took me to read Infinite Jest. There's The Stand by Stephen King, which is longer than Infinite Jest, but I never, slow down, because Stephen King's work is all about getting to the next page. It's all very exciting. You want to see if the survivors, can survive the madman in Nevada. You want to see who survives the plague. It's all this sort of, Stephen King's very accessible, and you don't have to think about the sentence level, which is not bad, but it isn't really good either. It's neither here nor there. It just makes the book faster to read. Ellison is the same way. None of his sentences are hard. You don't have to think about them. But what makes Ellison great is that his ideas presented in the text just sort of rattle around in your brain, so you think about these extremely interesting ideas, often very disturbing ideas, long after you put down the book. With David Foster Wallace, Infinite Jest, I don't feel that it has that sort of potential to rattle around. Yeah, drugs are bad. Yeah, society's corrupt. Yes, the obvious conclusion of American capitalism is that we start, sponsoring years. But that's one thing that it does in Infinite Jest. All the chapters take place in different years, and they're all sponsored by some sort of company, like a Penn's adult undergarment has sponsored a year, and so they dress up the Statue of Liberty in diapers and things like that, which really is the logical conclusion to America's consumerism. But putting aside all this neat little joke stuff, I don't think it adds up to anything. I don't think it gets to any idea that sort of resonates strongly with you. It brings out questions, and it has questions that it is interested in, but I don't think it goes anywhere. And so I would say that while a work of genius, I can't recommend the book. I can only recommend the book if you feel like you need to tackle it. If you've heard a lot about it and you're interested in to see what it's about, go ahead, but it's going to take you a long time, and you probably will want to throw it down after page 300. If you're interested in David Foster Wallace, what I recommend is this essay by him called Consider the Lobster, which is a very good essay about lobsters and lobster cooking. And I learned from it, and an interesting fact that you might not know is that lobsters are essentially immortal unless you eat them. So just consider that next time you're out Red Lobster. The one thing I will mention is that David Foster Wallace did kill himself, and not too long ago. I mean, it's within 10 years. If I had Infinite Jest bouncing around in my head, and I had written this, because it takes an enormous intellect to write this, I recognize that. I don't think it works, but I do recognize that a genius produced this. I think I'd probably kill myself too, though, because this book, to produce this book must have been so stressful and strenuous, and if you have that in your head, I can't imagine going on, because it's evidence of it shows evidence of a very disturbed personality that sees contradictions and hypocrisy everywhere, and I can't imagine anybody in that mindset's, you know, lasting too long. So that is Infinite Jest. I may do more of these if they turn out, if I like the way this one turns out. If I don't, then this will be the only review I do on YouTube. Unless there's a movie I really, really hate. Taken 2, perhaps. Alright.